There's a reason the strongest ones are often alone. Not lonely, alone, like a wolf. Focused, silent, unapologetically walking forward, while the world laughs, questions, misunderstands. He moves with purpose, because deep down, he knows no one can walk this path for him. No one can carry the weight that was designed to build his shoulders. People fear solitude because they mistake it for weakness. But solitude is a luxury, a rare environment where greatness is forged. It's not the absence of people, it's the presence of self. It's in that silence, not the noise, where the real battles begin. Where you face your shadows, where you discover your inner fire, where you stop chasing validation and start building emotional intelligence. You see, the modern world will seduce you with noise. It will whisper lies that your worth depends on approval, that your peace must be earned, that love is something you beg for. But the Stoic, he walks alone, not because he rejects the world, but because he's mastering himself before he ever tries to lead anyone else. Leadership starts here, not with speeches, not with applause, but in stillness, in silence, in those unseen hours when you sit with your flaws and refuse to look away. This is not just solitude. This is discipline, the kind that builds an executive mindset, the kind that earns unshakable respect, not through noise, but through presence. So, if you're here to rise, not just survive, if you're tired of playing roles, chasing applause, and folding under pressure, then it's time to stop running. Stand still, breathe, and walk forward, alone, like a wolf with lightning in his chest. This is your path, and it begins now. Most people spend their lives trying to be understood. They change how they speak, how they dress, how they live just to fit the mold of someone else's expectations. They edit themselves to avoid being judged. They water down their truth so they can belong to crowds that were never meant to carry them. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be aligned with your principles, your truth, and your purpose. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," he wasn't calling for performance, he was calling for integrity, for inner clarity, for the executive mindset that says, I don't need you to get me, I need me to stay rooted. Alignment means you stop chasing applause and start building internal authority. It means you live by truth, not popularity. You don't bend to trends. You bend inward to your own code. And ironically, when you do that, you stop being shaken by things that used to destroy you. Because most of the pain you feel in life isn't from rejection, it's from trying to fit into a world that was never designed for who you really are. The Stoics understood this. They didn't write for applause. They didn't speak to be liked. They didn't move with the herd. They stood where they believed, even if no one clapped. This is emotional intelligence at its highest level, knowing when to walk away from what feels safe. In order to stay faithful to what feels true, you will be misunderstood. You will be doubted. You will be called arrogant, distant, cold. But let them misunderstand. Because the goal isn't to be seen, it's to see yourself clearly, to live so aligned with your values that no opinion, no reaction, No silence can distort your compass. Alignment feels lonely, but it's not weakness, it's high-performance clarity. It's that quiet decision you make each day to stand firm, even when no one claps, even when no one agrees, even when no one follows. You weren't built to follow noise. You were built to lead yourself, and you can't do that if your identity depends on being understood. So start here. Don't ask, "Why don't they see me?" Ask instead, "Am I being true?" Because once you choose alignment over acceptance, you no longer need validation, you become it. They told you solitude was a curse, that being alone meant something was broken, that if you weren't constantly surrounded, validated, and seen, you must be failing at life. They lied. Because in a world addicted to noise, solitude is the new luxury. Not everyone gets to experience it, and even fewer know what to do with it. Most people aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of who they'll meet when there's no one else in the room, when there's no audience to perform for, no screen to hide behind, no distraction to numb the truth that's been whispering beneath the surface. Solitude strips away the excuses. It forces you to confront what's essential, what's real, what you've buried under busyness and validation. And that's why most people run. But the Stoic doesn't run. The Stoic sits. He doesn't fill the silence. He listens to it, because he knows true mental clarity is not found in conversation, it's found in reflection. When Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire, he kept a journal not for the world, but for himself. He didn't write to impress. He wrote to unmask, because in solitude, he wasn't a ruler. He was a man, raw, honest, accountable. That's what self-mastery begins with. Not image, but introspection. If you want to lead, if you want to rise, if you want to command the kind of presence that shifts a room before you say a word, then learn to be alone without feeling lonely. Because when you sit in silence long enough, you start hearing your true voice again, not the one shaped by fear or trends, but the one aligned with purpose. It's in solitude that discipline is built, not the kind that impresses others, but the kind that anchors you when life unravels. It's in solitude where your executive mindset forms, where you stop reacting and start choosing with precision, where your mornings stop being chaos and start becoming rituals, where your thoughts stop running wild and begin moving with intention. Solitude doesn't weaken you, it refines you. It's where your emotional intelligence matures, where your inner world becomes so stable that no crisis outside can shake you. This is not punishment. This is preparation. This is not exile. This is elevation. So the next time life pulls you away from the noise, don't fight it. Don't fear it. Honor it. Because this silence is not a void, it's a throne. And when you learn to sit on it, you rise not just with more focus, but with the kind of quiet power that doesn't fade. The fiercest battles are never fought in the streets. They're fought in silence behind your eyes, beneath your skin, and within your breath. You may have survived wars of betrayal, loss, failure, or loneliness. But the war that decides who you become is the one between the man you are and the man you're meant to be. And no one can fight that for you. This is not a battle of noise. It's a battle of awareness. A battle between impulse and intention, between chaos and clarity, between distraction and discipline. Every time you feel the urge to numb your pain with scrolling, every time you silence your truth to avoid confrontation, every time you break a promise to yourself, you lose a piece of your sovereignty. The Stoics warned us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. This is the root of emotional intelligence. Knowing how to observe your reactions instead of being ruled by them. Knowing how to pause before you speak. How to feel without collapsing. How to think without spiraling. The modern world doesn't train this. It trains reactions, not restraint. It rewards the loudest, not the most disciplined. But you weren't made to live on autopilot. You weren't made to drift from dopamine hit to dopamine hit like a leaf in the wind. You were designed for inner power, the kind that makes you unshakable, even when your entire life feels like it's falling apart. But here's the catch. That kind of power can't be borrowed. It must be earned. And the price, self-discipline, silence, self-awareness. You are your own battlefield, and your mind is either your greatest ally or your most dangerous enemy. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat still without reaching for stimulation? When was the last time you traced a painful thought to its root? Instead of covering it with noise or productivity, we like to think we're running from others, but most of the time, we're running from ourselves, from the voice that says, you're out of alignment. You've betrayed your purpose. You're choosing ease over excellence. That voice is not your enemy. It's your commander calling you back to the path. To cultivate a high-performance mindset, you must make your internal world stronger than anything external. You must train like a warrior, not with swords, but with stillness. Practice watching your thoughts like a strategist, not reacting to every spark, but understanding the terrain. This is what executive control looks like. Not cold emotionlessness, but the kind of calm that makes others respect you without you saying a word. The Stoic man doesn't ask the world to go easy on him. He asks for the strength to meet it well prepared. He builds his core not in comfort, but in quiet. Daily acts of courage, waking early, saying no, sticking to the hard thing when no one is watching, because he knows every small win in silence becomes a fortress in the storm. So the next time your mind pulls you into anxiety, distraction, or escape, don't run. Don't suppress. Just breathe. Observe. Choose. Because this war is not won with noise, it's won with presence. And when you fight that way with awareness, you don't just survive your mind, you lead it. You've spent years listening to the world, to its expectations, its opinions. You've followed trends, changed your tone, molded your identity like clay just to be accepted by people who never even knew your name. But in all that noise, you lost something. Your voice. Not the one others hear, the one only you are meant to follow. We live in a world that teaches performance before presence. From the moment you wake up, you're bombarded with messages telling you who you should be, how you should live, what you should fear, desire, chase. And if you're not careful, your identity becomes an echo, not a conviction. But silence. Silence changes everything. In silence, there is no script, No audience. No pressure to explain, impress, or edit. There's just you and the truth you've buried under busyness. The Stoics knew the value of silence, not as escape, but as alignment. They understood that true clarity doesn't come from adding more, it comes from subtracting what's false. When you sit still, the distractions fade. And what remains is what's real. Your fears, your regrets, your longings, your truth, unfiltered, uncomfortable, unmistakable. Can you sit with that? Can you stay long enough in the quiet to hear what your soul's been trying to say for years? Most people can't. That's why they chase stimulation, so they never have to meet the person they've become. But you're here to remember who you were before the noise, before the masks, before the pressure to become something you're not. In silence, your emotional regulation returns. You stop reacting. You start responding. You stop performing. You start feeling. You stop comparing. And finally, you start being. This is the birthplace of executive presence, not something you fake for a boardroom, but a presence so calm, so grounded, that it speaks louder than words ever could. You walk into rooms and don't need to convince, because you radiate something unshakable, inner certainty. Silence doesn't weaken your voice. It reveals it. It's in the quiet moments that your best decisions are born. It's where your values rise above your fears. It's where your mission pierces through the mental fog. You realize you don't need another opinion. You need self-awareness. You don't need a louder world. You need a clearer mind. So make silence part of your strategy. Let it become your morning ritual, your decision-making space, your evening sanctuary. Because in silence, you reconnect with the only compass that's never lied to you, your own alignment. And when that voice returns, not the voice of fear, not the voice of others, but the real voice, the voice of purpose, of resilience, of inner truth, you'll never need permission again. Because once you've heard yourself again, you'll never forget the sound of someone who finally came home. Most people think isolation will break you. But if you're walking the Stoic path, you understand something deeper. Isolation doesn't destroy you. It refines you, like fire tempers steel. Solitude burns away the unnecessary, the noise, the illusions, the false identities, until all that's left is your raw, unfiltered self. And that's exactly where the real transformation begins. The modern world has made people afraid of stillness. They equate being alone with being forgotten. But Stoicism rewires that narrative. It teaches that the man who chooses solitude is not retreating. He's rebuilding. He's not weak, he's awakening. While the world chases stimulation, he sits in silence. Not because he has nothing to say, but because his soul is listening. The fire of isolation doesn't show up with drama. It shows up with discipline, the kind that forges mental toughness in the places no one sees. At 5 a.m., when you rise without a crowd. At midnight, when you say no to temptation. In the middle of self-doubt, when you choose to keep building. This is where inner resilience is born, not in the spotlight, but in the shadow. It's in these quiet trials where you learn something essential, that you do not need anyone to witness your effort for it to be meaningful. You don't need applause to validate your growth. You don't need a cheerleader to become unstoppable. Every rep in the dark becomes a brick in your fortress. Every act of self-discipline becomes a layer of armor. Every moment you endure without escape becomes fuel for a high-performance mindset that won't crack under pressure. Most people are obsessed with how they look when they win, but the Stoic is obsessed with how he stands when he loses. Because the one who stands alone learns to generate his own momentum, his own leadership, his own fire. Self-leadership isn't a title, it's the habit of doing what's right even when it's hard. Especially when no one's watching. In the furnace of isolation, you learn how to sit with discomfort until it teaches you something. You stop begging for comfort and start seeking challenge. You stop blaming others and start owning your path. That is the moment when something shifts inside you, when silence no longer feels like absence, but like access to your real power. You don't just survive solitude. You begin to prefer it, not because you hate people, but because you finally met someone worth spending time with yourself. This is the kind of emotional endurance that elite performers train for, not flashy, not Instagrammable, but the deep, invisible strength that carries you through storms while others drown in doubt. It's what makes a man unshakable. Not his followers, not his fame, not his fortune, but the core strength that was carved into him in the sacred isolation he once feared. So the next time life pulls you into solitude, don't panic, don't resist. Step into the fire, because the man who walks into isolation with open eyes walks out with a soul made of steel and a mind that no storm can bend. In the daylight, it's easy to smile, to say yes when you mean no, to tolerate what drains you just to keep the peace. But when you're alone, when there's no one watching, no one applauding, no one expecting, that's when your true boundaries are born. Most people think boundaries are about keeping others out. They're not. They're about keeping your essence in, your peace, your focus, your energy, your soul. You don't build boundaries to be rude. You build them to protect what you've spent years developing: your mindset, your discipline, your truth. And boundaries, real ones, are never built in noise. They're built in solitude, in the late hours, when you finally ask yourself, who am I allowing into my mind? What am I tolerating that's costing me my alignment? The man with no boundaries is not free. He is available to everyone and true to no one, not even himself. The Stoics didn't walk around with walls, but they knew where they stood. They didn't need to prove their worth. Their silence was enough. Their presence did the speaking. That's what executive identity is: walking into any room and knowing who you are so deeply that no opinion can touch it. No insult can rattle it. No rejection can bend it. Emotional sovereignty begins when you stop letting others dictate your state, when their absence no longer creates your collapse, when their approval no longer determines your peace. You don't control them. You command yourself. That is personal leadership. That is real power. And it begins with one of the hardest disciplines: saying no. No to energy vampires. No to endless distraction. No to empty conversations that lead nowhere but back into doubt. You're not being selfish. You're being clear. Because you've realized that your time, your energy, and your inner stillness are not public property. They are sacred resources, and only those who honor them deserve access. Start by asking yourself what conversations drain you, what patterns keep repeating because you allow them to. What people do you keep rescuing while abandoning yourself? Then go deeper. What parts of you still believe that setting boundaries is mean? What childhood conditioning told you love must be earned through sacrifice? These answers live in the dark. You can't find them in a crowd, only in solitude, only when you sit long enough with your truth that it becomes louder than guilt. You don't owe anyone unlimited access. You don't owe constant availability. You don't owe a version of yourself that costs you your soul. You owe yourself loyalty. You owe yourself alignment. You owe yourself protection from the chaos of the world, and sometimes from the chaos you've let in too long. So draw the line, not in anger, in clarity, not to punish, but to protect, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. Because every boundary you set in the dark becomes the reason you can walk into the light with confidence, calm, and power. There's a myth that strength must be loud, that the powerful are the ones who speak the most, post the most, dominate the room, and command attention. But ask yourself, have you ever met a truly powerful man, one who walks in silence, yet shifts the entire room just by being in it? Because that is real power, the kind that doesn't shout. It resonates. The Stoics never begged for attention. They didn't wear power, they embodied it. Their influence wasn't in their tone, it was in their posture, their presence, their inner authority that needed no announcement. Seneca once said, "Be silent as to services you have rendered, but speak of favors you have received." It's not weakness, it's restraint, the clearest sign of control. Executive presence doesn't mean you dominate, it means you don't have to. You walk into a room and people feel your clarity, they feel your alignment. They sense a man who's not looking for approval but who lives by a compass deeper than public opinion. That's a rare man. And in today's world, he's magnetic. The loudest man in the room is rarely the strongest. He's usually the most insecure. The truly powerful man has learned to command not with volume, but with discipline, calm, and conviction. He has nothing to prove, because he already knows who he is. And that, knowing that inner power is louder than any speech could ever be, this is silent leadership. You don't lead through force, you lead by presence. By being so aligned with your principles that others recalibrate just by being near you. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. And clarity, in a world of chaos, is magnetic. Want to be respected? Stop performing. Stop explaining. Stop trying to win every argument, every comment, every reaction. Be still. Be direct. Be immovable. Because when a man is calm in chaos, collected in conflict, and quiet in crisis, people listen not because he's loud, but because he's anchored. This isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about mastering it. This isn't cold, it's intentional. Because high-performance power isn't reactionary, it's deliberate. Every word you don't say becomes strength stored. Every silence you hold becomes influence earned. Every outburst you resist becomes respect retained. So don't confuse silence with weakness. Don't confuse stillness with passivity. You are not weak because you don't shout. You are strong because you've outgrown the need to You are not passive because you don't argue. You are wise because you've seen the cost of pointless battles. True power is silent, unshakable, rooted, disciplined. It moves like water. It strikes without noise. It doesn't ask to be seen. It demands to be felt. There's a lie. The world keeps whispering that to be human is to be constantly attached. Attached to people, to opinions, to outcomes, to recognition. But the Stoic doesn't chase attachment. He cultivates clarity. And clarity only exists where detachment begins. Don't misunderstand. Detachment is not coldness. It's not emotional shutdown. It's emotional discipline. It's the ability to feel deeply without becoming enslaved, to love without clinging, to care without collapsing, to give without losing yourself. Detachment isn't absence, it's sovereignty. You lose your power every time you let the external dictate your internal. Every time someone else's silence ruins your peace. Every time an outcome hijacks your energy. Every time a like, a compliment, or a text becomes your validation. You've surrendered your throne. But the Stoic walks differently. He doesn't fight for control over others. He takes full ownership of himself. This is where executive energy is born. When you stop leaking focus through emotional chaos, when you stop chasing shallow connection and start living with intention. Most people can't concentrate because their attention is fragmented, tied to relationships that drain, wounds that haven't healed, expectations they never chose. But detachment sharpens you. It cuts away the excess. It clears the emotional static. It liberates your ability to focus deeply, act decisively, and think clearly. Detachment isn't about abandoning people. It's about refusing to abandon yourself. You're not ignoring emotion. You're managing it. You're no longer ruled by reactivity. You're moved by purpose. And that shift from reaction to alignment, that's what builds high-performance focus. That's what creates mental clarity that doesn't waver under pressure. You want to do meaningful work. You want to lead, create, transform. Then you must detach from needing others to believe in you. Because if your clarity depends on their applause, your mission will never be bigger than their approval. That's not freedom. That's imprisonment. The Stoic detaches not to escape but to sharpen. He steps back so he can see clearly. He says no, not to isolate but to preserve. He protects his schedule. He guards his sleep. He filters his input. He invests his energy like it's sacred, because it is. That's not selfish. That's self-respect. So here's the truth. Your life doesn't need more connections. It needs more clarity. Your mind doesn't need more stimulation. It needs stillness. And your path doesn't need to be louder. It needs to be cleaner. Let go of the noise. Detach from the distractions. Release the emotional debt. And watch your power return not with force, but with focus. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." He was born a slave, chained, beaten, owned, but inside he was untouchable. Because while his body was confined, his mind was fortified. That's the inner citadel, the part of you that no one can reach, no matter how loud the world gets, no matter who walks away, no matter what they try to take. Most people don't even realize they've handed over the keys. They let a stranger's comment ruin their day. Let silence feel like abandonment. Let approval become oxygen. That's not love. That's dependency. That's not connection. That's emotional enslavement. But you're here to build a life where your peace is your own. Where your value isn't rented out to people who don't even know themselves. The inner citadel isn't built on motivation. It's built on discipline. It's built when you get back up after failing silently, when you follow through on your word, even when it's inconvenient, when you sit with your own thoughts long enough to know which ones are lies. This is the quiet work, unseen, unpraised, unrewarded by the crowd. But it is the very foundation of self-leadership. Your citadel is where emotional independence is forged, where your decisions aren't influenced by how others might react, where your center holds steady, even when everything else shakes. It's not about becoming numb. It's about becoming non-reactive. It's about owning your response. Not just surviving emotions, but guiding them with intelligence. This is the root of executive stability, the ability to lead, decide, speak, and love from a place of calm clarity. So, how do you build it? You stop outsourcing your confidence. You stop waiting for permission. You stop chasing shallow highs and start cultivating deep roots. You rise early when no one claps. You journal truths you'd never post. You track your triggers and train your thinking. This is not sexy. This is not performative. This is structural integrity, the kind that keeps a man standing when everything else falls. Your inner citadel is not just about resistance, it's about resonance. It's the place you return to when chaos knocks, the shelter you enter when heartbreak tries to break you, the compass you use when the world spins in circles. It's your core leadership system, not built on charm or charisma, but on clarity, values, and unshakable truth. And the best part, no one can build it for you, and no one can take it from you. Once it's forged, it's yours. Yours to protect. Yours to expand. Yours to lead from. So let others play the outer game. You focus on the inner fortress, because when the storms hit, and they will, you won't be the one running for shelter. You'll be the man who is the shelter. There's a moment in every Stoic journey when you stop needing the crowd, not because you've given up on people, but because you've finally shown up for yourself. That's when something changes. Your pace slows, your presence deepens, and your silence starts to speak louder than any explanation ever could. You've become unshakable, not because nothing moves you, but because nothing breaks you. Most people walk with noise in their chest. They carry the weight of others' opinions, regrets, expectations. They're tossed by every trend, every emotion, every rumor. But when you've done the work, when you've built your inner wealth, when your peace comes from alignment, not applause, you no longer walk in reaction. You walk in rhythm. You no longer need the path to be easy. You just need it to be yours. This is core stability, the kind that anchors you when storms rise, the kind that lets you hold your ground, not with force, but with calm confidence. You're not passive. You're precise. You're not emotionless. You're emotionally disciplined. The world won't understand. They'll call you distant. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. Because you've stopped dancing to every demand. You've stopped apologizing for your standards. You've stopped explaining your evolution. You don't need everyone to get it. You just need to get yourself clearly, firmly, fully. And that is executive clarity. When you walk alone, you stop chasing external validation. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop trying to be seen because you finally see yourself. And once that vision sharpens, you can't go back. Not to small talk, not to shallow praise, not to people who only love you when you're convenient. You no longer rise and fall with others. You rise because it's in your nature. You lead not for approval, but because your path requires it. You stand because your values hold you up when the world tries to pull you down. This is the resilient mindset that separates noise from substance. This is what it means to walk as a man who needs nothing, but stands for everything. So walk alone, not to escape, but to remember. Remember your truth. Remember your strength. Remember the silence that rebuilt you when no one else saw. Because when you walk alone, you don't walk empty. You walk with presence. You walk with fire. You walk with God-level stillness in your chest. And in that stillness, you don't need to prove anything. You just become it. That is what makes you untouchable. That is what makes you unshakable. That is what makes you a Stoic. You've walked through the silence. You've sat with the pain. You've looked in the mirror and faced the version of you that the world never sees. And now, you understand something most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You don't need more noise. You need more truth. You don't need more followers. You need more fortress. You don't need to be carried, because you've learned to walk alone, aligned, and unshakable. That's the Stoic path. It doesn't promise applause. It doesn't offer shortcuts. It doesn't guarantee comfort. But it gives you something far more valuable. A life rooted in integrity, a mind that stays calm in chaos, a heart that doesn't beg but breathes from inner wealth. You don't need the world to validate your journey anymore, because you're not walking to be seen. You're walking to remember who you are. So when the world grows loud again, and it will, when they try to pull you back into noise, comparison, and chaos, you'll smile, not in arrogance, but in awareness, because you've already found the fire, not out there, but in here. And once you carry that flame, you don't need a map. You are the path. Walk in silence. Move with intention. Live from within. And let your life thunder in a world addicted to echoes. If this message resonated with your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who's walking their own path. Like this video, subscribe, and remember, you don't need the crowd to become powerful, you just need courage to walk alone.